I'm Aryeh Schwartz along with Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. WNBA free agency saw a lot of movement, big names changing teams. Now that things have calmed down, let's discuss the moves and what is the current state of the WNBA. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. Are you looking to get tickets for the upcoming WNBA season? Thanks to our sponsor, TickPick, you don't have to worry. The original no-fee ticket site and official ticketing partner of the WNBA champion, Chicago Sky. Use the link tickpick.com/Winsidr for all your upcoming ticket purchases for the WNBA, NFL, NBA, or any other event. Again, that's tickpick.com/Winsidr. Rachel, before we get into all the free agency news, some news broke today, and I don't admit breaking isn't the right wording or whatever you want to say, but reporting came out today. A great article from Howard Megdal, just talking about the tug of war of, in my mind, from a grand scale of this league's growth, and it kind of dives into some key aspects, key details of the last season of the hot topics in the W. So let me just dive in with what in my mind were the key bullet points of this article. Everyone should go check it out. It's been retweeted all over social media. If you haven't already seen it, it's not hard to find. But the key points in my mind, and Rachel, feel free to interrupt me or add something, whatever, as always. Last year, the New York Liberty charted flights for most of the games, if not all of the away games following the All-Star game, a direct violation of the league rules. The team was fined $50,000 for that league violation, and Joseph Tsai, the team owner, worked out a deal with a charter company to sponsor team charter flights for all 12 teams for the next 3 years, but it was voted down. They did not have a majority vote by the league owners. I'll let you react first. I could go on like a mile-long rant about this, so I'll let you react first because I know you got strong feelings also.
Well, first off, it was $500,000 for the team fine, which is, I believe I read it is a league record of a team of a fine. So all sorts of, this was a bombshell. This was incredible reporting. This was really fascinating because I think for me, this exemplifies kind of like the direction the league is going, while still you have to pay attention to kind of what was and where we're trying to go, and just the growing pains that are going to be associated with this. And on one hand, it's like, you have these owners that are willing and able to invest into these teams to have the resources that we all so desperately want. And then we're gonna fine, and we're gonna, honestly, I think in some ways I agree that they did get off pretty easily for blatantly
it was a joke,
for blatantly going against the CBA, the rules, and literally just saying, we're not going to follow it. We're going to take these charter flights. On one hand, I think that they got off pretty easy. On the other hand, I love that they still chose to do it. We could talk about the competitive advantage, and I think there's both sides. I'm just shocked by all of it, to be honest with you. The fact that we didn't even know any of this was going on too, through the course of the season or the back end of the season. So you have to be able to sit down and look at all sides of the coin here. And I'm still very much taking in some of this information, and it's only been out for a few hours now. So I'm very curious to kind of, me personally, ask around and ask some questions and just try to continue to educate myself on this. But yeah, to blatantly ignore the rules and go do this, you can't fault the WNBA for having to do some sort of reactionary disciplinary action. They have to, what was chosen, what was talked about. I mean, the suspension of the entire one of the oldest franchises in the league and like a marksman franchise in the league. That's the shocking part to me. Like, you know, we already struggle enough with roster spots and we're all so amped up for expansion of the league. And here we are talking about like potentially you know, eliminating this franchise. That was a bit shocking to me. You know, so again, a lot of pieces that I'm still kind of very much taking in, and it's like, wow. I mean, these new age owners and what they're able to bring to the table and what they're able to invest these investors can bring. I mean, it's amazing, and that's the direction where this is going. But you have kind of a clash of this older school ownership group where, and this is the part for me of that article that was so shocking that it was like, okay, competitive advantage. All right, well, we found a way where we can provide these charter flights for everybody in the league for 3 years. Basically, I guess at no cost. I don't know how, you know, how exactly that would have worked, but it was shot down by the majority because of what was the reasoning? It was they didn't want
Well,
players
I
to get
have
used to it.
Rachel, I have well, no, I have a quote or
Okay.
a tweet put out by the WPA, the Players Association of the WNBA, and they said that this just came out. On September 13th, according to a source familiar with the call, the WNBA Board of Governors considered an unofficial proposal from the Liberty to make chartered flights the default travel option for WNBA teams. Liberty said they'd found a way to get it comped for everyone in the league for 3 years, but it lacked majority support. Some owners worried that the players would get used to it, so there'd be no going back, and others wondered whether players might just prefer a salary hike instead.
Well, that came from the article, so they must have just been
Yeah.
retweeting quotes from the article. But yeah, I mean that's interesting right there. I think for me, my personal take, without again asking a lot of questions and learning more that you know we don't necessarily know, is how do you turn that down? You know, I mean, afraid that they might get used to it. All right, so we can't put that in place and give these women, these professional, the best in the world, the type of travel that we've all been talking about for years now, and we're just afraid that like in the we can't find a way to sustain it beyond 3 years from there. You know what I'm saying? Like I just find it absolutely shocking
Mhm.
that that was shot down. And I'm curious as to why. What some of those people who choose to shot that down? What was the reasoning? Because I'm looking at it as an outsider and I'm going, well, that seems like a no brainer to me. Um, but you know, for me, it's like you have to be able to take those risks. This league, and what we've seen, especially in my opinion, the last 3 4 years, the growth, the trend, where this is going really makes me like I really believe that in those 3 years we couldn't find a way to sustain charter flights and find further investment and find you know ways to keep that travel something where it didn't just all of a sudden have to go back to we're flying commercial. Like I that was the most shocking part to me.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction is kind of similar with you. I think maybe I'm more of a hard ass, excuse my language, where I'm like, the 500K was just a joke. Like the when I saw in the article talk about eliminating the team or whatever the hell it was, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. I agree. The idea of finding them with draft picks, I think, is a much more applicable fine just because it's a competitive advantage. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Interesting enough, I saw someone tweet out that the team's record during that period of time was not that great. Maybe they were enjoying the chartered flights a little bit too
Well,
much.
yeah,
That's a
that's another
joke,
point
not
too.
a
Like that's when the Liberty were like losing every game. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Remember that was like the back end of the
yeah,
season, and like they were really
yeah.
struggling.
When they like Jar Jar Binks
But you
into
have
the
to admit, it
finals
is
or
a
into the playoffs.
competitive.
I mean,
It is a competitive
oh,
advantage, 100%.
it is 100. You can't have it both ways. You can't sit here and say how bad it is to fly charter and all the negative aspects of it, or sorry, to fly commercial and all the negative aspects of it, and then on the flip side say, well, it's not a competitive advantage. Like I get it. A lot of players are out there saying this is ridiculous. How can you find them? Blah blah blah. I'm sure some players are also saying that amount of a fine means absolutely nothing to a billionaire. The thing for me is, well, also an interesting aspect, should fines come out of the salary cap or where should the fines come from? Because is it just hitting the owner's pocketbook? I don't know how that works. But that's an interesting aspect to me. For me, it's just that it's this simple. I completely agree with you, Rachel. It's absurd and idiotic for the owners to sit there and say, Joseph Tsai spent a few months and got this deal with a charter organization for the whole league. And for the rest of the owners, the 11 other owners, well, it's more because it's not just one person, but for the 11 other owners to then sit there and say, we can't do the same in 3 years is idiotic in my mind. And it makes absolutely no sense, to be quite blunt. It's very clear the trajectory of the league and where they're going. We're going to be bigger and better in 3 years, and we could probably get an even better charter deal in 3 years. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. The other thing is this. I agree with you. This is a complete violation of the rules. It's a competitive advantage. It should have been punished more. We can say in the same breath, hey, we want better for this league, but at the same time, we don't want teams cheating. And I like the point that you made about this is going to be part of the growing pains of this league. We have these old owners that we can shame them for this vote, and I completely agree for shaming them for this vote. The thing I don't want to do is to raise up these new owners as like these, godsend heroes or whatever, when in reality, let's talk about it. They view this as a business move also. They said in their minds, nowadays, the WNBA is a worthy investment, so we're going to put our chips in the table and we're going to buy a team. Where were they 5 years ago? Where were they 10 years ago? Right? Like, we have older scale owners, and by older scale, I mean they've been around the league much longer, who say what you want, they've been invested in this league, and without them, we wouldn't have a league. We've seen what happens when Dolan wanted to get rid of the Liberty and how long it took to find an owner. When the Houston Comets left Houston because, as successful as they were there, they were not able to find a Houston owner. So they had to move around. Like, in my mind, I just think it's much more nuanced and gray area than a lot of people want to give it credit for.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, that's why I personally am fascinated on asking questions and understanding the different sides of
Mm-hmm.
this. I can have my initial reaction of like, "Holy crap! Why the hell would the league do this?" I honestly, I mean, I'm actually fine with a $500,000 fine. Like personally, I'm like, okay, good. I don't want to see the Liberty gone. I love what the Liberty did. In some ways, like it's like hell yeah, like someone take some
But it,
initiative
but
here and let's do it. But
but
go ahead, go ahead.
no, oh, no, all I want to say is like we're talking as if like the 500 or $500 the 500,000 fine is like the bare minimum, and the team like being excommunicated, whatever you want to call it, defunct, whatever, is the high line. I feel like there is a middle ground, and while I agree with the sentiment of the 500K being like the smallest thing ever, I just think that like if you want to be serious, and this is a big thing, when it comes to league rules, it is and I don't say this lightly. It is the way that the WNBA enforces some rules is a joke, and I think this exemplifies it. That's all.
Hey, it still was a record fine.
Which does that like is this the worst thing that's ever happened in the maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, it
But
certainly is. It certainly is unprecedented. I mean, it's like it shows you like we're gonna look at this moment. Who knows? Hopefully sooner rather than later. 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we're gonna be talking about this moment and this reporting and kind of what happened with the Liberty and that ownership group. And like, it's no matter which way you spin it, it's raising the bar one way or
Well,
another.
and that's what somebody said to me. Somebody was like, and I want to give Miles Ehrlich credit for this, but I don't know if it was him. So don't give him credit, people. No, but he said something to the effect of like, or maybe it was someone said this to me, and they were like, Joseph Tsai sat there and said, "Oh, 500K to make this public and like push the needle and progress this league. That's nothing. Let's do it." Truly, that's what it is, right? Like, yeah, it's an unprecedented fine in the grand scheme of things. It's diddly to him,
I, I,
and it
I'm
will be a turning point in my mind. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and I'm honestly shocked it took this long to come out. To be honest with you, um, I
Yeah.
mean, not that I know when the right time would have been, but it's like this is really interesting that this is coming
Mm.
out right now.
Well, the other aspect, Rachel, that we don't even need to necessarily get into, but you just brought it up, is the timing of it. If
Mhm.
this comes out right before free agency, is that considered tampering to an extent? I mean, to a degree, this news coming out, I don't know if I would call it tampering to the degree where like you need to find them more, but when players find out that, hey, This owner basically said, "F it to the rule book. I'm flying you guys private. I'm taking you to Napa, blah, blah, blah." Like, end of the day, if that doesn't make players like in the same way that we talked about with MGM, I forget what it was. I believe Matt Ellentuck had an article a few years back about how MGM was like finding ways that weren't explicitly written in the CBA, finding ways to get their players more money or better living situations or something to that effect. And how players just wanted that and wanted to vibe towards that and go towards that. I think it's a similar thing.
Well, and someone brought up the question to me too, like, well, like, but I mean, this is the new CBA. Why would they agree to it if they didn't like it? And I was kind of bringing that question to you too. I said, well, it is the rules in the CBA that was agreed upon amongst league and the players of the league. You
Yeah, I take that with a huge grain of salt. And and
For
and
sure,
I
for sure, for
you
sure.
know, because like, look, end of the day, that's like saying, okay, well, the the players don't have a right to like advocate for more money or for anything different because they agreed to that contract. The whole reason the simplistic response to that in my mind is just they signed the CBA because that was the best they felt they could get at that point,
At that
not
moment,
because yes,
which was
not
what, 2
because
years ago.
yeah, exactly. Not because they felt that this was the perfect deal. I don't think anybody came out after it and said, "This is a perfect CBA. Let's sign it for the life of the existence of the league." No, it's never a perfect CBA. The whole idea is we agree to this, but we're still going to use our voice to bring up what we feel should be better and can be better, and then they should.
Yeah,
Any final
it's
thoughts?
amazing how just that CBA already almost feels dated with how much this conversation and the growth of this league is being rapidly, discussed and talked about and pushed for and advocated for. It's like, wow, okay, like I just again I come back to this moment about we talk about the way they travel, um, and we're going to be talking about this for a long time. And I think there's a lot to unpack. And again, I just go back to that whole 3 year thing where everybody could have had the opportunity to fly charter in a way that the league had never seen before. This was groundbreaking. And that was voted down. I genuinely want to ask questions and try to understand. Like, I want to see both sides of the coin.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, like to your point about the CBA feeling dated, I do feel like it's I don't know. There's a term for it. I don't know the term, whatever. But basically, in the sense of like when it happened at the time, like
It was
we were all
it
happy
was
about it. But I
groundbreaking.
feel like
Yeah.
it was groundbreaking. But even at that time, Rachel, I maybe I'm making this up in my mind. I feel like you and I had a conversation at that time where like this is groundbreaking and this is two steps forward for the league in general. But it's still not like we all understood. And honestly, I feel like one of our biggest critiques of it back then was the period of time. I want to say it was like an 8 year period. That the period of time that this CBA was an agreement to. I know that there's an opt out clause after like 5 years or something like that. I don't have it right in front of me, but I do feel like not to pat ourselves on the back. I do feel like it was a situation where we knew this was growth, but we knew that it wasn't done right. Like it's almost for to make a WNBA analogy, it's like the Connecticut Sun. We've seen growth through them over the past 5 years, getting from no playoffs to playoffs to losing the same round over and over and over to making it to the finals to being the top seeded team in the regular season. We understand that there was growth there, but it's not the growth that we expect from them. We expect a championship. We expect more growth from the W. Any final thoughts on this bombshell of news before we move on to what this episode's supposed to be about 20 minutes later?
I also
The free agency.
I also just think you're seeing such a discrepancy of the teams that have money and the teams that don't. I mean,
Hmm.
the teams operating in the red versus the team with these superpower, high power ownership investment groups. It's like, and it's we could talk about other leagues as well, but for me, you're like, wow, this is really. And I'll use the Chicago Sky, for example. They just won the championship. I think it's phenomenal that they won the championship. They don't have the same type of ownership and investment group as the Las Vegas Aces or the Liberty. You know what I'm saying? So like there is such a discrepancy in ownerships and resources here that is like glaring. That's
Hmm.
my final point.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a whole nother episode we could dive into. Um, well, let's talk about the teams that made the real moves. I don't know why I say the real moves. Let's talk about teams
Franchise
that made
free
right. I don't know
agency
why I
move.
wrote that. Free agency moves. Yeah, I wrote real moves in our show notes, and now I'm like, what was I thinking when I wrote that? let's talk about. I'm gonna run down the list. Not every team's moves. I like as we always talk about. There's a lot of training camp contracts. There's a lot of contracts or players who are signing, who are not going to make the end of day roster, and it sucks. I wish we had more spots in the league, but I want to talk about the big moves, the names that I think are going to make large impacts, and see where it goes from there. So I'm just going to list it down. Then we're going to talk about, our reaction, our thoughts, whatever.
Perfect.
Minnesota Lynx, they bring back Sylvia Fowles and Leja Clarendon, and they bring in Angel McCautry, which is a really interesting move. The LA Sparks bring in Katie Lou Samuelson, Liz Cambage, and Kennedy Carter. The Chicago Sky bring in Emma Mieseman and Julie Alamon, and they bring back Sloot, Quiggs, and Copper. The Connecticut Sun bring back Courtney Williams, bring back a few years later, and John Jonquil Jones. New York Liberty signed Steph Dolson and the Spida. Um, the Mercury, they got Tina Charles, Diamond Shields, and bring back Sophie Cunningham. The Seattle Storm get Brian January and bring back Stewie for 1 year, which is a key talking point, and Jewel Lloyd for 2 years, another key talking point. And the Washington Mystics bring back Tiana Hawkins. Um, you know,
Don't
uh,
forget about Gabby
we
Williams.
and Gabby Williams goes to Seattle also. I apologize. Um, a lot of interesting moves, a lot of shifts in here. And the thing that I like so much about this is it's every team, not every team, but there's so many teams now that they can tell their fan base we're poised for a deep playoff run. I wish the playoffs were longer, so a deep run would make more sense. Um, but like so many teams can look back at this and say, "Hey, we had a great free agency. Hey, we really did it." If you had one vote, Rachel, for who won free agency in your mind, who are you talking about? Who are you thinking?
For me, it's really tough between Chicago and LA, but I have to give the nod to Chicago because of just they got better. They found a way to not just bring back their championship core, but to get better pieces around them, in my opinion. Um, and that's not going to be surprising to anybody. I mean, we've been talking about it for weeks now. So, but I mean, LA I think deserves to be right up there at the top of the conversation.
So I'm similar with you where it's Chicago and LA, but I'm going with LA, and I'll put it as simple as this. The one thing I haven't seen Chicago do yet, and it pains me if anybody listens to this show, these episodes that we normally do, and Rachel, you know this. It pains me to say this, but I haven't seen Chicago fill the hole that Steph Dolson leaves. I love the idea of Emma playing alongside Candace Parker with Azrae Stevens. Do not get me wrong. I love that idea. But at the same exact time, I would like to see Chicago find a way to bring in some more size, for depth in that big position. And then you look at LA. I mean, LA has moved the needle more than any other team, right? Like, yeah, the Phoenix Mercury did some nice job getting Diamond, Sophie back, and Tina Charles. For me, the honestly, the of Tina Charles is going to be a subtraction, unless she takes a bench role.
Hot take.
But the way what?
I said hot take.
I think it's pretty lukewarm. I think people, and maybe I'm just a hater. I don't know. They call me hater, yay. But like at the end of the day, I just think you're taking away one of your like Turner is just that good of a player, and I would not start Tina over Turner just for the obvious issues that it's going to cause. I do want to, because I'm from Minnesota, give a shout out to the Minnesota Lynx because I think they did one of the more intriguing moves, right? Like we know what the Mystics get from bringing back Hawkins. Shout out to Tiana Hawkins, who had an amazing AU season where she just dominated, like scoring. She scored like over 30 in every game she played in, which is just ridiculous, but lovely to see. And then the Seattle Storm at January and bring back some players that the team is used to, and obviously Courtney Williams going back to the Sun. But the intriguing one, I think the move that intrigues me the most besides LA, because LA just moved the needle without a doubt. They brought talented star-studded players to this team, and I think this catapults them into the playoffs. Where in the playoffs, I don't know. Like best case scenario, this is a championship contention team. Worst case scenario, the wheels fall off the wagon and they can't get out the station. But adding Angel McCautry to Minnesota is so freaking interesting. Like,
Hmm.
you're never going to be able to perfectly fill the role that Fee has on that team,
Yeah.
with Fee likely being out the whole season with being pregnant. Um, but just the idea of the addition of Angel and the versatility of her if she's healthy, and bringing her to that team is so interesting on so many levels. And we gotta get Angel or Cheryl to come talk about, just in depth what we're gonna see from this, because like, Rachel, I think we were texting about this at one point, when the rumors started to swirl, or when videos or photos were posted of her getting wined and dined in Minnesota with Fee. That was an interesting aspect too, was they were using Fee as their kind of ambassador delegation to the Angel McCautry camp. um at first I was like, how does that make any sense at all? And the more and more I think about it, maybe I'm just convincing myself of it. It just intrigued me to no end, and I'm very excited to see what happens with that team. Any other team that kind of sticks out to you that you're just like, I'm excited to watch them play so I can get a sense of this?
I mean,
All of
I
them.
just it just feels like there's such a clear cut like top five, and then the rest it's like okay, we're okay being maybe not okay, or maybe some of us are strategically trying to be in that lottery. Um, you I think Connecticut obviously free agency was not going to be um, you know, groundbreaking or have these bombshell moves. But I'm excited for Connecticut as a super team. I think Chicago, you have to establish them as a super team. Seattle, with who they're bringing back this final year, a super team. You have to talk about Phoenix as a super team. I think LA when it comes to LA and Phoenix. I'm kind of sitting here like, what does this look like? Whereas the others, Seattle, Chicago, Connecticut, you kind of know there's a consistency factor there for sure. Even though Chicago, Misamin, and Alaman are huge additions. But like with LA, they went out and just said, we are going to get the best players available and we're going to attract top talent and we're going to fix the one thing we couldn't do last year, and that was score the basketball. Well, now you bring in just pure scorers from all sorts of angles and an ability to stretch the floor, and Katie Lou Samuelson. And um, I just think that that's going to be very interesting. Like some of these teams, I wish we had reality shows that we could just see how
Right.
these teams integrate, how these players and how the team just kind of comes together from a chemistry standpoint. And I have a lot of questions with Phoenix too. I mean, it kind of comes back to like that whole Liz Cambage and Asia Wilson topic that we've talked about for a few years now. Like, how is that going to look with Griner and Tina? And I'm very fascinated with that. But and then even
Tina
Diamond
off
too.
the bench, Rachel. Like, and I know that maybe people see that as disrespectful. I think people are too hyped on Tina, and maybe this is poster board material, and she has like a picture of me and throws darts at me. But like, I just think the addition of, like, we all talked about this. Diamond to Shields needed a new place. I love her being with this Mercury
Me
team. I
too.
think she
Me
adds an
too.
element that they really need.
Yes.
I hope her 3-point game grows a little bit this season. But again, Tina Charles, I just feel like you said it best. The Asia Wilson, Liz Cambage 2.0 with Brittany Grant. And that's why in my mind, Tina comes off the bench. So often people look at coming off the bench as the sixth woman or the seventh as a negative, as an insult, especially if you're a top tier talent or a superstar. I always say, take a page out of the Renee Montgomery book, win championships.
Hmm.
It's not about being a starter. If it's truly, 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 and we saw by her contract, maybe it was a forced upon her contract, but that she's taking less money so she can try and win a ring on a team she feels like she can win it on. I just think at the end of the day, you're better suited to go against, like, to have a great player go against the backups so you can extend that lead. I don't know. It just frustrates me that people are like, Turner has to start. She's too good on this team not to start.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I mean, I understand what you're saying about Turner too, what she's brought to this team, and the intangibles she brings to this team. And I just, it has to come down to roles and who's taking shots. Tina's coming from a situation in Washington where she had to get whatever 20 shots a game. Maybe it wasn't that much, but you
For
know what I
them to
mean.
lose.
She's leading the league in scoring and just playing like just unbelievable. It's not going to be that way. How you can't get you can't get Tina Charles types of shots, 2021 Tina Charles shots while getting Brittany Griner her types of shots. And I mean that's just going to be really interesting to see how that whole thing unfolds there in Phoenix. But I agree, I love the look of Diamond there. I think that's they definitely got better. I think you're still going to have the same issues of depth and can they defend, but that's a topic for another day. I do want to bring up, you know, we really didn't have much to talk about with Dallas, and I think that was the right call. They didn't necessarily need to go reinvent the wheel. I think you've got some decisions coming down the pike here where you move away from some of these quote unquote younger players. Indiana, I mean, don't get me started there. New York,
Well, wait. Indiana, I do want to say the big news of with Tamika Catching stepping aside, I have so much respect for her in realizing that she has not lived up to, her, I don't want to say ability, but like she hasn't lived up to her playing name in the side of being the GM and stepping aside. I think it's hard for a lot of people to acknowledge that they aren't doing a good a job as they feel like they should be doing and that somebody else can do better and to let them in. Now, that said, give it a few years. Maybe she's by the side learning from Lynn Dunn, learning from some other
which is
people.
what should have happened in the first place.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
mean, to just be thrown into that situation, whether it was welcomed with open arms or however that went down, there's a part of me that's like, she was set up for failure. Now, again, I don't know the exact inner workings of the Fever organizational franchise, but it just kind of feels like, man, and I don't think this has anything to do with her legacy. I don't think this tarnishes any. I don't agree with that whatsoever, and I respect her for her decision. But she should have gone into a situation where she could have been kind of groomed and learned alongside an experienced GM in the league, and then stepped into that role.
Yeah.
Period.
No,
That's all I
I
have to say
agree.
about
Sorry.
that. But I want to say, we haven't talked about New York. I don't think that New York necessarily moved the needle with Steph Dolson. That's not a knock to Steph Dolson. I just think that obviously a lot of changes. You've got a new coach in Sandy Brondello. You've got a lot of players, franchise players, who were hurt last season. So this roster is still kind of to be determined. I don't think they necessarily had to go out and hit grand slams and reinvent the wheel here. It's a similar situation in my mind as kind of like a Dallas in some ways. It's like, you've got these assets and we want to see what these assets can be, and we want to let this, we want
Hmm.
to trust the process with this. So like for me, I think, yeah, Steph Dolson brings a little bit of on-court leadership, locker room leadership, vet experience that I think any team would be lucky to have. But like in my mind, it's like the Liberty are still 2-3 years away, and they're going to be a major, major, major problem. But this year, like, yeah, I mean, you get Natasha Howard healthy. Let's see what Sabrina can do. Let's see what some of these other players that really elevated their roles last year can do, and integrating in Sandy Brondello's system. Like, but I also think on one hand, like, if they end up being a lottery team, it's not necessarily a fail in any way, shape, or form either. Um, and I think that's
Well,
okay.
okay, so I agreed with you on everything, Rachel, until you said that last thing. I think it's a fail because it's a fail for any team to
I
be a
don't think
right. Like
so. I don't think
every team,
so. I don't think
and that's
I don't
fine.
think
We can
that
disagree. That's not a
I
new
think that
thing.
this draft and I mean it's they did not go into this free agency looking to hit like absolute I mean, obviously they met with Brianna Stewart and Jewel Lloyd, or the different reporting that came out during free agency, but this is a long-term play. This is a process with the Liberty. And we're
Completely agree.
still in those
Completely
early
agree.
kind of couple years, with the investment and the ownership of this team. It wasn't even that long ago. We were still in the Westchester Center, like, you know what I'm saying? So you've got to do it right. And I think that even if this team ends up being a lottery team, they're going to have highs, they're going to have peaks and valleys this season. I don't think I think that their front office is like that is very possible, and we're okay with that.
Well, and I'll echo what you've said, and there's certain aspects that I completely agree and completely disagree. Like I completely agree with you. We're going to see a much healthier team. Even if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to be a scary team. I don't think we can deny that. Regarding hitting a home run with Steph Dolson, you're right. It wasn't a home run. So often, and this pisses me off. This steams
Oh
my
my
engine.
god.
This irks me. No, like I think, and it happens with coaches and it happens with players too, where after so like there's 12 people on the roster, there's 6 coaches in the locker room coaching. Just because you were part of the championship team does not mean like it's an end all be all amazing signing, amazing move. Like Steph Dolson, I'm just gonna say this was not the reason they won the
Although
finals.
she was key in some of those games down the
Yes, she was well in one game. But no. Like I agree, she was key and very important, but she's not the reason they won. Similarly, when Marion Stanley coming off a championship year, I believe it was a championship year before she goes to Indiana, from Washington, she was not the reason that the Mystics won the finals. I think so often, teams try and bring on a player for whatever reason and use the marketing campaign of they're coming off a championship year and this is why the team won because of them, and that's just not accurate. This New York Liberty team is going to be much better. The addition of Steph Dolson is a good addition. It will help them. The bigger deal is if Sabrina's healthy, if Natasha Howard's healthy, and if Benai Jelani and a few of those other players can focus on not making stupid turnovers at half court behind the
Oh
back
my god.
passes. That's the bigger deal at the end of the day. This team showed success. And I think the other thing that we haven't talked about enough with New York is having an experienced coach who knows how to coach different skills, different talents, and win games is going to be so key for
Tenfold.
this team with having
Tenfold.
Sandy Rondell.
Yes. Yes.
So that's my rant for the day. We haven't spoken on the WNBA for like 3 weeks because I was on a road trip to introduce my son to his grandmother's. Or great grandmother's. I apologize for us being so late, and I apologize for me going on these rants, maybe hating a little bit too much, getting too many hot takes, whatever. They've just been boiling over when you drive over 4,000 miles across the U.S.
Well, I'm glad that you made it back safe. We made it through another free agency. I got a chance to breathe a little bit. I got engaged. So I'm very excited.
Whoop, whoop,
Lot of big
whoop.
things going on here. But yeah, thank you guys for riding with us through this free agency period, and happy to be back here chatting hoops with you.
We'll be back with another episode soon. So keep your ears to the podcast and make sure you subscribe on wherever you get your podcast, The Winsidr Show.